Okay, so we are live, it seems. Yes. Okay. I'm messing with the lighting and camera still, so we'll see how this goes. But I definitely seem to have gotten better video quality on the samples of this camera that I saw online than after I got it. So we are going to try and achieve that level of, I don't know, optical quality, I guess. Today I want to talk about theories of everything and how to judge them because uh, I don't think that we have any clue how to do this. I've been basically like listening to a bunch of different theories and people's opinions on what a theory of everything is, and um you know it's just not consistent at all. Like this is chaos, and it's not chaos. It's not meant to be chaos. A theory of everything, or more or less a theory of every one, is not chaos. It's not chaotic at all. It has a very specific definition, and it must fulfill very specific requirements. If it doesn't fulfill those requirements, then it is not a theory of everything. And I think that a lot of what is being claimed as a theory of everything is not a theory of everything. So this episode is going to be dedicated to kind of cutting through the weeds. What is a theory of everything? What is a grand unified theory? What is a unified field theory? What is a unified theory of physics versus a unified theory of the cosmos in general, which is not just a theory of physics. And I think that this idea that a fundamental theory of physics is a unified theory of everything, essentially, is kind of part of what's holding us up. And you know the physicists are to blame. Again, per usual. Um, it was interesting the other day. I I had discuss. I've been having these discussions during our Discord calls, and I highly recommend you message me for the link, and you can join every Thursday, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Um, I've been discussing my theory with some PhDs in the philosophy of consciousness lately, and they're much kinder in telling me that I'm wrong, incorrectly, I would say, but still, um, I say that with respect because they're much kinder in the way that they go about this than the physicists, and it's odd because I mean it makes perfect sense because philosophers like to debate and discuss ideas, and physics people like to know the answer. That is different. It's a very, very different thing. And it's been a welcome change, you know, to have people who actually want to debate and discuss these ideas, even if I disagree with what they have to say or they disagree with what I have to say. It's fine because that's the point, or discussion is the point at least. Physics, that's not the point. And uh, I think that we need to maybe detach the idea that a theory of everything is particularly within the realm of physics in order to truly understand what it is. And I've been listening to a lot of people lately. I listened to Bernardo Kastrup lately, brilliant guy. I've been listening to what's this other guy's name? Let's see here. I was listening to a bit of Sabine Hossenfelder. I've been listening to, obviously, Wolfram, per usual. I mean, it's really one interview of Wolfram, but it's so long that I just rewatch it and I learn something new every time. I have been listening to, what's this other guy's name who's brilliant? His name is uh, Josh Josha Bach. Josha, Joscha, Bach. So been listening to him as well, and these people aren't just physicists. A lot of them are computer scientists and philosophers, and this is a much better, way of thinking about the context of a theory of everything than physics. And obviously, there's physics, alignments, and there's political alignments in politics, and there's moral alignments, and there's familial alignments, and genealogical alignments, and biological alignments, and molecular alignments, and atomic alignments. There's all kinds of alignments, because we're talking about the theory of everything. So it's going to occur on every level of objective observation. But we're going to talk about that. But really, it's not a theory of physics. It's a theory of information more than it is a theory of physics. And even more so than it being a theory of information, it is a theory of sentience, of consciousness. And everybody knows this. This is why, physics, whenever it's discussing a theory of everything, and it's really going below the standard model, it can't stop talking about consciousness. They just can't. They can't even help themselves. Like, they don't take anybody seriously who seriously brings it in and says, it's fundamental to matter, or it is matter. Consciousness is matter. They don't take those people seriously, especially if they don't have degrees. But maybe that's why we need to branch off of physics for this, because it's not really about physics. It's about consciousness. It's about information interpretation. It's about observation. It's about perspective. And this is why computer scientists, and because they are, they work in the realm of information. And philosophers, they work in the realm of perspective, are much more suited to describing the theory of everything, if there is one. And I would argue that it's not a theory of everything, it's a theory of every one more fundamentally. But you know that if you watch the stream. So, let's see who's here. Hello. And, it's interesting. I was like listening to some just critiques that I have of my work, and one of them is that I have no formal education in any of the necessary fields. They said the necessary fields, so physics, math, as if these are the necessary fields in order to know the theory of everything, which is interesting because, like, if we don't have the theory of everything nailed down, then who is anyone to say what the necessary fields are in order to have a theory of everything? But regardless, they mean physics. And I think physics has kind of like developed this tyranny over this idea, and it's part of what's holding everybody back. And I think that I was listening to, Stephen Wolfram talk about metamathematics, and even Sam Harris talk about consciousness and how it's even he admits that consciousness is unavoidable as as being linked to the fundamental way in which we at least experience reality, obviously because we experience it through our consciousness. But I don't know, I don't think he was going so far as to say that it is that panpsychism is real, or I think that's what it's called, where everything is conscious, which is true, but it's not true in the way that many people think about that. Every object that you see around you is not conscious. Does Joshua Bach not have his own podcast? I don't know if he does or not, but I've seen him on a few other people's podcasts, and it's interesting to listen to him because he gets it. He gets that this is about consciousness. So I want to talk about what a theory of everything is. And we're going to go through the various contenders and start to judge them, because this Friday morning, yeah, you guys will not see it until Monday, but I am going to be interviewing a guest, and I will show you his channel actually. A theory of everything. Here. Okay. I'm also going to be working on getting faster internet pretty soon, before we have some bigger interviews coming down the pipeline, which I do have planned. Hoping to get Robert Grant on here, and a number of other people. But let me just pull this up. Gosh, YouTube is going slow, or it's probably my computer, but yeah. Here we go. And then we're quitting any extraneous applications on here. Slow. I said at the beginning of these streams that I really needed a MacBook Pro, and that is still true. I'm running everything on a MacBook Air, and it is not enough. Okay, here we go. Ooh. It's really not enough. Come on, computer. Oh my gosh. Okay, here we go. This guy. His name is Luis Razo Bravo, and he is going to be speaking with me on Friday. I'm going to record it, and then I will publish it on Monday. He claims to have developed his own theory of everything. This is his channel. Whoa. Or that's my channel. What the heck? Just happened. Here is his channel. This is his channel. And highly suggest you subscribe. He has some great content. And he wrote a book that is his theory of everything. And what's interesting about his claims, and first of all, when I first unveiled my theory last year, he was very skeptical, but he was always, very just impeccable with his word, kind, you know, and honest. He was like, I don't think you have done what you think that you've done, but, you know, interested to see what you come up with. And that is enough, you know, that's, you can't really ask for anything other than honesty and kindness from people. So, but he's clearly, you know, very well educated. He went to Harvard, and, you know, I mean, I'm not a big fan of academia. Everybody here knows that, but he's spoken with a number of people here, and he, in my conversations with him privately, he seems to know a lot of what he's talking about. And I want to uh, discuss with him how a theory of everything can relate to topics beyond physics. And because he said my theory, not meaning mine, but his, interesting, he even shows us the same, similar font as me, but he says here, science, management, and humanity. So he said that his theory relates to morality, politics, government, you know, family, all kinds of business, all kinds of things, and it's applicable to a bunch of human structures. And I said that mine was as well, and he said that his he had never heard of anybody else's other than his and mine, apparently, that is like that. And so I wanted to have a discussion with him about it, because I think that any true theory of everything is going to truly branch beyond just physics. I mean, it is inevitable, and it needs to happen also, so that we can get really, like, out from under the tyranny of the physics departments that actually don't know what is going on in the universe and have everybody else fooled. And I mean that, like, very literally. But this is you know, this is his intro to his page. I think it should be a great interview.
The human quest for clarity must begin and end with physics. Why? Because physics
We're going to
is the
talk about
most
that.
foundational of all the sciences. Even our most important psychological experiences are mediated by and through our physical brains.
Disagree with
Without
him
physics,
already.
there's no philosophy, or consciousness, or economics, or anything else. At least not in this world. This basic fact that everything is hinged on physics is going to make the task of understanding ourselves extremely challenging, because physics is intimidating, and trying to make sense of its mysteries seems downright impossible. If we don't get our physics right, however, our social systems will continue to be built on bad or truncated ideas, and that's something we want to change.
Okay, so obviously he's making a branch between physics and our human structures, and that's kind of what I want to do as well. But I don't think that physics is fundamental. I don't even think that it's a fundamental, that it is the fundamental science. What did he call it? The
Because physics is the most foundational of all the sciences.
Yeah. See, I totally disagree with that. And one of the interesting things that I recently saw was that I was listening to Bernardo Kastrup, and he said that we had lost the understanding of certain words. And I've discussed on here before that once one of the craziest and most amazingly enlightening things I had ever seen was once I saw someone sent Owen Benjamin a dictionary from like the 1800s, and then he pulled out a dictionary that was modern, and people were asking him to look up certain words, and he would look up the word in the modern dictionary and then look it up in the dictionary from the 1800s and see the difference between the meanings in the old dictionary versus the new dictionary. And they were drastic. I mean, they were so drastic that they didn't even seem related. And this is one of those. Uh, Here we have Bernardo Kastrup discussing this and explaining why this is kind of like a problem to an impediment regarding us having like a modern theological tradition, I guess, or a modern theological interpretation.
Signs, right? Words. We live the narrative that we tell ourselves about what we are living. So words, in a sense, are important, and we've lost the meaning of so many words. We've lost the meaning, and I'm not taking a cheap shot at homosexuals by saying this. I'm certainly I'm a defender of homosexuals if you read my site, but we've lost the full meaning of the word gay, for instance. The original meaning of the word gay is spontaneous joy. But now, now sort of linguistically, only homosexuals have spontaneous joy. Is that fair? No, we lost something. We lost the meaning of the word metaphysics. That which is more primary, is behind and precedes physics. Now it has become synonym for spiritual woo-woo. And we've lost the meaning of the word religion. Religion comes from the Latin religare, to reconnect with the source, or with transcendence, with the ground level of reality from which the life force arises. But because of institutionalized religion, now religion has become synonym with morals, a moral code, dogmas, and beliefs. Where is the rejoining? Where is the relinking? Where is the religare? Where is the religion? And the religion sort of got washed away. I mean,
So I think he has a huge point. And I've said this before. I hate the word religion. I hate the word science because they're both just two attempts at saying, quest for truth, the path towards truth. Now, he said that religion has become synonymous with morals. That's true. I don't think that I think that any quest or path towards truth will result in morals. Just will. But, and those morals will always be the same, no matter what the faith, or, faith tradition, I guess you could say. I hate the word faith, too, because I don't think that I have faith in God. I have an awareness of God. And that's the best way to put it. I've heard other people, Ben Shapiro said, I don't just have belief in God, I have knowledge of God. And that's pretty good. But I think it's better to even say, I have an awareness. And maybe you don't. And if you don't, then don't say that. If you just have belief, then say, I just have belief. And then eventually, you can work towards awareness, and God willing, you will achieve it. But, and it is a mutual action. God has to want that, and you have to want that. But I think awareness is the goal. And with religion, I had asked Eric Weinstein once on Brian Keating's podcast, I said, do people who do religious people, and I use the word religious, but because it's understood what that means by most people, do religious scientists have hurdles, and should they that are unique, and should they pursue other paths outside the normal academic pursuits? And he said, basically, yeah, probably, but not always, but yeah. And he said that religious scientists are going to be the next dynamos in science, because they are dedicated to their ideas in a way that secular people are usually not. And but I also think that there's other reasons why he says that, whether or not he admits them publicly. And it's but he had said that that there was an obstacle, because basically, in admitting that a belief or a value on God you are inherently revealing that you believe in something without evidence, essentially. And that's not true at all. I don't believe in something without evidence. I think there's more evidence for God than there is for almost anything else that exists. And it's just, what are you looking for the right evidence? But this what's interesting though about Bernardo Castro, getting back to that, is that he said, we lost the idea of the word metaphysics and religion. I didn't know that religion meant to reconnect. I had no idea. And I just know what we mean in what it means to us now when we say it. And it's not a really valuable thing. But if it means the path towards reconnection with source, that is very valuable, makes sense. But then he said metaphysics, we've lost the understanding of the word metaphysics. This is exactly what also E. Michael Jones said, and I agree with him on that. Certainly not on everything, but certainly on that. He's very right. We've lost a metaphysics. And we have basically claimed that quantum physics is metaphysics without claiming that quantum physics is metaphysics. But the issue with this is that metaphysics is fundamentally centered around consciousness. It has to, because every force has to be initially caused by a conscious being. And this is not something that is true this is not something acknowledged by physics, even though it should be. And we've detached consciousness from metaphysics and then called it quantum physics, and it's taking us nowhere. And I would say it's taking us actually in a detrimental direction, because it's taking us in a direction that doesn't acknowledge the sentience of some of these particles, like hadrons and atoms and molecules. That's not good, because it's a fundamental lack of understanding, and that fundamental lack of understanding can lead you to do things that are not just incorrect and lead you to nowhere, but also, I would say, immoral, without realizing it even. And there is a debate of, if you don't realize it, is it really immoral? But that's another discussion. But we do need a metaphysics, and Stephen Wolfram has kind of restarted this with a new kind of science, he called it, and it's metamathematics, because we can't say metaphysics, because as Bernardo Castro, pointed out, we now associate metaphysics with woo-woo nonsense, whatever that even means. And this, though, is why we need to detach a theory of everything from physics. It's not a theory of physics. It's a theory of information and informers and the informed, and that means that it's a theory of consciousness. So, whose field is consciousness? I don't know. That's the question. Is it computer scientists? I would argue no, it's not. Is it physicists? I would argue no. Is it biologists? I would argue no. Is it chemists? I would argue no. What it is it's all of these combined. So you could say you're a metaphysicist, or you are a philomath, as Robert Grant, puts it. And that is like philosophy and mathematics combined. Speaking of, This is Robert Grant's book, Philo Math, new book. I recommend picking it up. It's pretty amazing. It's filled with so much work. I mean, he's got pages and pages on 432 hertz, which he's done amazing work on. I've played some of his music that he's, you know, tuned, and it has so many of his drawings. Looks familiar. I mean, it's just incredible. That's amazing. It's just amazing. I highly recommend picking it up. The fact that this guy draws this much, like, I do a lot of work, guys, but I do it in Excel and I can copy paste. I can't, like, he cannot. I don't know how he does it. I mean, he's been at it for years longer than me, but still. And then I did pick up these. I don't know when I will read them. I'm sure I will glance through them. Chris Langan's books. I found that they look very interesting because you can see that the patterns here remind us a lot of that and of my verse model. So it's interesting. This is his book on quantum metamechanics. This is what we need. We need a meta theory. And it's basically constructor theory, but not if constructor theory is anti-theist, which I talked about in the last stream. So let's get into some of the various theories of everything that we have and start defining what requirements they need to fulfill, because they are very important requirements. So first of all, that. Then, okay, so here's my website, Sentient Singularity Theory, Theory of Every0ne. And then it says here, very specifically, because I thought this was very important to say right from the beginning, a theory of everything is a recognizable, predictable, and describable pattern that occurs in all instances of objective observation and an explanation for such a pattern. As I've stated before, this part, very important. And this, capital E, is what it should be, really. So, let's copy this down. Okay, so there we go. This is the definition of a theory of everything. It can't be anything else. And we can kind of look at what other people think it should be. A theory of everything, according to Wikipedia. A final theory, ultimate theory, or master theory is a hypothetical, singular, all-encompassing, coherent theoretical framework of physics. Wrong. Wrong. That fully explains and links together all physical aspects of the universe. Finding a theory of everything is one of the major unsolved problems in physics, because it's not a physics problem. But the reason why it seems like a physics problem is because the theory that does unite quantum mechanics and general relativity is pretty much a theory of everything. It's just applicable across far more than just that instance. So it says these two theories upon which all modern, okay, so then it says here, string theory and M theory have been proposed as theories of everything. Over the past few centuries, two theoretical frameworks have been developed that together most closely resemble a theory of everything. These two theories upon which all modern physics rest are general relativity and quantum mechanics. General relativity is a theoretical framework that only focuses on gravity for understanding the universe in regions both large scale and high mass. On the other hand, quantum mechanics is a theoretical framework that only focuses on three non-gravitational forces that for understanding the universe in regions both small scale and low mass. This is true in relativity, obviously, but this is wrong in what's going on. The person that described this as the definitions of the two, no matter who they were, if that's really what they believed as the true, constraints of what these two theories were, then they don't know what's going on, because that's not what it is. It is about interactions. Okay, that is what this is. When you look at the quarks and you're like, up, down, strange, charm, truth, beauty, top, bottom, these are all perspectives of a consciousness. Something can be charming, something can be strange, something can be up, down, bottom, top, truth, beauty. These are all perspectives regarding the relationships of consciousness. And if you're going to tell me that it is a coincidence that they're named such, then I think that the people who named them knew more than whoever's going to claim that it's a random coincidence. But this idea aligns with this right here, because basically what it is if you want to look at the stages of sentience here, what it is quantum mechanics, general relativity, and that's it. As you can see, they're just two sides of a coin. It's not that complicated. It's not about size. It's not about mass. It's not about large mass, small mass, small scale, large scale. It's about where are you in the superposition, where are you focused in the superposition of sentience, which is this, which has a head perspective and a body perspective. This is quantum mechanics. This is general relativity. Like I said, head particle, body wave. This is why this deals in gravitational waves and this deals in, discrete particles. It's not about size. I don't understand why this is so complicated to people. I do, I think, but it just basically means that the people who are studying it today have no idea what they're talking about. And if Wikipedia is correct, then or not correct, but correct in its description of what, is standard accepted physics about, quantum mechanics and general relativity, then yeah, then I'm right. And that physicists have no idea what's going on, which is why we need to break a theory of everything away from physics, because it's not about physics. It's about information. It's about perspective. It's about consciousness. So, back to this. So here we have string theory, and we have loop quantum gravity, geometric unity, emergence theory, computational universe theory, sentient singularity theory, constructor theory. What is Nassim Harameyn's? Nassim Harameyn theory of everything. The connected universe theory. Okay, I like that. I didn't even know what he called it. The connected universe. Okay. Connected universe theory. Max Tegmark's mathematical universe theory. Like, do you see what these people are doing now? They're all trying to list it as something almost that is like almost guaranteed to win if you don't really know what's going on, like mathematical universe, connected universe. You know, computational is not really as bad as these two, but as far as a name goes, I'm not saying that the work is bad of any of these. I'm just saying if your name is like mathematical universe, it's like, or connected universe, it's like, I get that you're right, it's connected, you're right, it's mathematical, you're right, it's, emergent, there's all kinds of things, you're right, but it's all of these things, so none of them, if it is this and this and connected and mathematical, and geometrically united and emergent, it's like, okay, guys, if it's all of these, it can't, none of them can be the theory of everything, the fundamental, because it's this one and this one and this one and this one and this one. And obviously you got to break into the weeds and see which one gets the closest, but I'm telling you, I see this guy's got truth in it, in his work, this guy's got truth in his work, they've got truth in theirs, truth, even truth here. So you can't just look for truth, because it's not enough to just have true, equations and true models and be able to make predictions, because every single one of these can do that. Every single one. So that's not how this works. Let's see here. So we have a theory of everything. There's quantum gravity. Okay. Space curvature. Electronuclear force, which is the grand unified theory. So basically we have this. A grand unified theory or gut versus a theory of everything or theory of everything, which is a toe. So we have a gut and we have a toe. Interesting. That's pretty funny, actually. And is a model in particle physics at which high energies, the three gauge interactions of the standard model comprising the electromagnetic, weak, and strong forces are merged into a single force. Okay. I guess let's take that. And then here we have a theory of everything, or TOE, is a final theory, ultimate theory, master theory. There's a hypothetical, singular, all-encompassing, coherent theoretical framework of physics that fully explains and links together all physical aspects of the universe. I'm going to pull that, but, you know, we're going to not necessarily agree. Because this is the theory of every0ne, let's say. Come on, what's going on, Guillermont? Okay. Let's say this is 1, 2, 3. Let's see what else we've got here. So the two theories upon which all modern physics rests are general relativity and quantum mechanics. So we would say that it is a theoretical framework revealing a deeper underlying reality. Unifying gravity with the other three interactions must be discovered to harmoniously integrate the realms of general relativity and quantum mechanics into a seamless whole. Okay. Which is, you know, basically this. Somebody asked me today if I was an organized person or whether or not I was, you know, chaos person. Definitely both, but Excel lets you organize your thoughts, and that's I talked about that a little bit, and just like how I use it for everything. And even, you know, people get, you know, I don't know, they don't care about framing and, you know, all that kind of stuff, and it is important, you know, to organize the world around you, and what you're looking at is to organize your mind. So it's important to have, you know, a degree of consistency that is apparent everywhere. That in the space that you are using as a map, I guess. This is what we're building. We're building a map, and that is funny that this is a toe and this is a gut, but okay. So, cosmology, Big Bang cosmology, in which the universe contains three major components. First, a cosmological constant associated with dark energy. Second, a postulated cold dark matter. And third, ordinary matter. Oh my gosh, I just had an epiphany. Okay. I bet you dark matter is the heavens. It is the save space. It's not hot. It's cold. You don't see it. It's there. It holds everything together in a way, because it's saved everything's position and relationships, but because it's not moving in space-time, it's not interacting with space-time. I wonder if that is like what dark matter is. It's just this, it's like the shadow of the save space. I've had a couple different theories on what dark matter is, but that's the latest, I guess. The other one, I haven't thought about it even for years. But okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Interesting. So we have string and M theory. Believe that in 11-dimensional M theory, which is described in some limits by one of the 5 pertuitive string theory, superstring theories, in another by the maximally supersymmetric 11-dimensional supergravity, is the theory of everything. However, there is no widespread consensus on the issue. One remarkable property of string/M theory is that extra dimensions are required for the theory's consistency. In this regard, string theory can be seen as building on the insights of the Kaluza-Klein theory, in which it was realized that applying general relativity to a 5-dimensional universe, with one of them small and curled up, looks from the 4-dimensional perspective like the usual general relativity together with Maxwell's electrodynamics. This lent credence to the idea of unifying gauge and gravitational interactions and to extra dimensions. Another important property of string theory is supersymmetry, in which together with the extra dimensions are the two main proposals for resolving the hierarchy of Standard Model, which is roughly the question of why gravity is so much weaker than the other forces. The extra dimensional solution involves allowing gravity to propagate into other dimensions while keeping the forces confined to a 4-dimensional space-time. This idea has been realized with explicit stringy mechanisms. Okay, so I'm not saying that any of this is false or true or anything. All I'm saying is that if you are talking about space-time, you're done. You're done. Like, it's not... If space-time is a fundamental aspect of your theory, then it's not one of these. It's not this either. It's just, you found some math that unites some of this stuff, and that's great, but it's not correct. So I don't know. So let's basically let's list out some criteria. So other than this, it has to be recognizable, predictable, describable pattern that occurs in all instances of objective observation. So we have to define this. We have to figure out what is objective observation, because not every observation is objective observation. So occurs in objective observation. And I'll tell you why this is, if you're thinking, well, you're taking your own definition and therefore like what, that's a cheat. I'll show you why this has to be correct. It's not that I took this definition as a cheat. It's that I deduced this definition because it's the only one that can be. And then, and an explanation. For said pattern. So there kind of has to be two parts to this. There has to be what is the pattern and what is the context of that pattern, and the reasons for its existence. I'm going to try and show you that the reasons for that pattern is consciousness. So what is objective observation? Objective observation is when you are dealing with existence itself. Okay? And this is very important because a theory of everything is a theory of all of existence. And all of existence is existence itself. And what's important about contextualizing this is that it gets rid of the potentiality for the introduction of nothingness. You can't have nothingness. It doesn't exist. Okay? So, whoa. Existence itself. And this means two things. One, it has inherent oneness. Because there's only one existence. And two, that nothingness is non-existent in any description of this, essentially. Like, you can't have nothingness. So you can't have like zero apples, as I always use the example. This is very important. It creates a constraint. Okay, it doesn't. That helps frame where things go from here. You can't have any theory of nothing, so there can be no zero. There can never be anything. All the constraints that this causes is constraint. Is that one, you have oneness, okay, which is a constraint. We'll talk about why particularly that's important when we start discussing consciousness, but nothingness is non-existent, and this is very important because it means that you can't have the emergence of zero. So zero cannot be a emergent or I guess calculated value. You can't do it. And so when people are like, well, you know, the universe is basically matter can't be created or destroyed. As soon as you hear that, it means that is not actually a fundamental rule. Okay? That's what I mean by this is so important. So, matter must be created. It must. You can't have matter can't be created or destroyed, or you know, energy can't be created or destroyed. Energy and matter. Energy, matter, / information now are constrained in such a way that they must be created. This is a huge change in everything you've learned about physics. This is why you need to snatch this away from the physicists who have kept this under their, you know, pillow and guarded it at night. And I've had no idea why they're doing this. I'm ripping on them, but like, I'm trying to change the culture here and the narrative because it's important that we really realize like how ridiculous this is. The physicists are, you know, essential. Not saying that they're not important, not saying physics isn't important. Of course it is. It's not fundamental. This is what we're going to argue with, one of the things we're going to argue with, you know, Luis Razzo on, because he's wrong. It's not the fundamental science. Metaphysics is the fundamental science. It's the, you know, the science of forces. Other than, you know what, I would actually say philosophy and metaphysics simultaneously is basically like the fundamental science. Maybe even, you know, I'm going to say it, numerology. These are the fundamental sciences. Make sure I'm still streaming. We are, cool. I have 2 old encyclopedias from 1950s and early 60s. That's awesome. You should definitely keep a hold of those. I've heard YouTube has trouble providing what they do and has to pick and choose. What do you mean? Like pick and choose what we see? That makes sense because just the amount of content. I'm guessing that's what you mean. Jim Bob is not the guest, but Jim Bob is in Idaho right now. But when he gets back and things calm down, he is going to come onto the show. Hello from Ireland. Hello from Los Angeles. I've always liked your music. I was like weirdly obsessed with the Irish when I was a kid. I'd like pretend to step dance, and I would watch Irish movies all the time and listen to Irish music. I don't know what it was, but I have like, I'm a fan of the Irish. So glad to have you. In Kurt's first interview with Kastrup, one of the first questions was, what does it mean to explain something? Curious what your answer to that would be. To explain something. I would say a better way to say that is to describe it, and then I mean, basically it is what I said about, you know, what is the theory of everything, essentially, is like, you have to describe a pattern and then give an explanation for that pattern. I would say that's what it means to explain something. So to describe a pattern and then to explain the explanation for that pattern. What's interesting is that if that's the answer to how do you explain something, anything, it kind of makes sense that this is the definition of a theory of everything, because it's like the definition of explaining anything. So makes some sense. St. Patrick's snake thing, maybe. I don't know. I mean, with how much I like snakes, it is weird that I like the Irish. But yeah, so I mean, that's what I would say is what it means to explain something, to describe a pattern and then explain why it's there. So, but this is huge. Like, huge. Anyone that says matter cannot, conservation of energy. So we can say here, conservation of energy means in physics and chemistry, the law of conservation of energy states that the total energy of an isolated system remains constant. Let me ask another question here. If physics is the fundamental, okay, it's the fundamental science, then its rules would be different than chemistry. So when we say, when you look at chemistry and it says, here, in physics and chemistry, the law of conservation of energy states the total energy of an isolated system remains constant. It is said to be conserved over time. This, I think, is wrong. I mean, it's right in its context here, but that's not true of a fundamental theory. Because a fundamental theory is about how do we go from one existence, so from one, to many, which means the addition and multiplication, and aka growth, of information, which is energy, which is matter. And that is not what's happening in the law of conservation of energy. So physics, if it has the same rules as chemistry, it implies they're both not fundamental, because you wouldn't say chemistry is fundamental law of science, fundamental field of science. You'd say, well, physics is the fundamental field. Well, if the rules are the same for both, it would imply that both of them are not. They're not. The rules change. So the constraint of oneness as the start in information calculation or information growth implies that you must grow that number above 1. You can never get it to 0. And because you can never get it to 0, because 0 cannot be emergent or calculated value, because that would imply that nothingness exists, and nothingness doesn't exist. That means that it has to be 1 and up. And that means that matter / energy / information, which is all the same thing, which is also sentience, consciousness, must be created. Okay? There's no other theory that I can think of that will tell you that. Maybe constructor theory, but I don't know. This is a rule. Rule 1. Or just rule. This is one rule. This is another rule. Okay. Another rule is pattern must be recognizable. I guess let's do this. Recognizable, predictable, and describable, and an explanation for such a pattern. What's interesting about this is that it is 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm capitalizing this because that pattern is also a pattern of consciousness, and you want to capitalize God. So he is that pattern. So you have these 4 rules. Okay. And then you also have an explanation for such a pattern. Okay. That's coming up soon. And then you have essentially objective. Or total. Or united. Same thing. What's interesting about this is that you have 4. You have 1. You have 1. This is a binary triality. And it's, 2 sets of 3 and 3 sets of 2. That's what it is. An explanation for such a pattern. And you have, the properties of such a pattern, or the context of such a pattern. You have the fact that it's recognizable, and oh wait, I think I might have included an extra too quickly. Recognizable, predictable, and describable pattern that occurs on all instances of objective observation, and an explanation for such pattern. Okay. Yeah, there we go. I see what I did. So what's interesting about this is that this explanation for such a pattern breaks down into 2. It's the explanation on the macro scale of what is it about what you're seeing that is the explanation for what you're seeing. And it's also what is it about you? Okay. So what is it? Explanation for such a pattern. So for seeing said pattern, and for the existence of said pattern. So this is basically the binary aspect of this. And this is when I talk about this, I'm like, okay, well, when we look around, we see this binary triality pattern everywhere, and we see everything breaking down into these repeating patterns, particularly that one. And the reason why this is the case is because it's our mind organizing information into a, categories that is then, organized into a hierarchy, and that's what's happening. But it's also that your mind is observing a mind in which that information is probably already categorized into said categories and organized into a hierarchy. So it's like a twofold thing going on where the universe is doing the same thing as you, and that means that the laws of physics are going to mirror the laws of mind, and you will interpret it on your end as what what is objectively happening even outside of your mind as the laws of physics, but really, or the laws of the universe, but really they are the laws of mind as well. They're just the universal mind, and then your mind is following the same laws, and it is interpreting the pattern of the universal mind via the same exact pattern of the individual mind. So, rule explanation for the existence of said pattern, which is universal. Or rules. And then here for you, it is the mental rules. But the thing is that they're the same. They're not different. These are united. They're not separate. You could be like, merge the two. So, anyways. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then this is kind of like 6. So, because this is essentially what is objective observation. So now people will say, well, it has to unify quantum mechanics and general relativity. No, it doesn't. It does do that, but it doesn't have to do that. They're looking for the wrong things. Now, that is an emergent, phenomenon of what happens, but it's not the goal. This is where we're so lost. We're so incredibly lost in science. Like, it blows my mind. Every now and then I back up and I'm like, okay, life always existed. It did not start at cells. That was an arbitrary and incorrect line that we drew. Also, God is an inevitability and exists. All that exists is sentience, and also there's no objective shape of the Earth because space is emergent. It's probably manifests as a flat plane when you're inside it, intraterrestrial, and it manifests as a sphere when you're outside it, extraterrestrial. That means outside. It doesn't mean off Earth. This is the whole thing again. We've changed the definitions of words, and it has screwed us. We say, well, when you're off Earth, I want to get off this rock. It's like, you're not getting off the rock. That's not the right way of thinking about it. There's inside, outside, separate, and oneness. So, are you inside Earth, intraterrestrial, or are you outside Earth, extraterrestrial? They're like, oh, these extraterrestrials. What does that mean? It means they're outside of Earth. So, it's like, that's a big difference. Outside, on versus off changes how far away you are from something and whether or not you're touching it. Inside versus outside is a total shift in what you see, okay? And so, but every now and then I just back up and I think about this stuff and I'm like, yeah, there's no objective shape of the earth. Life never had a beginning. It just always existed. God is a logical inevitability. And, you know, it's like, how much do we have to rewrite of our contextual framework scientifically? Everything. That doesn't mean that, you know, the double helix isn't correct and the standard model isn't basically correct and the, you know, the properties in the periodic table of elements isn't basically correct. It is. But the framework of what it means and why they're there and you know, our stupid little tests of whether or not you're should be taken seriously, like, oh, are you a flat earther or something like that? Like, flat earthers and sphere earthers are the same people, guys. They're the same people. Like, they're both they both believe in subjective truths as objectively true. Wrong. That's all I'm gonna say. Wrong. I said that to Brian Keating on Twitter. I was like, he was like, oh, you know, he said something about being a flat earther, and I was like, and he answers me, like, he follows me on Twitter, and like we have a, you know, I don't want to say like we're close friends or anything like that, because we're not, but I would describe him as a friend, you know, a professional, you know, restricted to primarily professional relationship, but still, you know, friend. And but he didn't answer me when I was like, well, if space is emergent, which he wouldn't take, you know, as a crazy idea, then doesn't that mean that the shape of the Earth is also emergent? And then he just didn't answer me. I wonder how much he thought about that after I said it. But I get it. You gotta be careful and do things slowly. You gotta be prepared to defend your position instead of wobbling on things just because somebody said something that kind of like recontextualize, you know, a worldview in a moment. But some of these are the rules that a theory of everything needs to follow. And trying to best organize them probably like that. So then we have that. We have these. Which are basically emergent from this one. Now, everything else is going to be like, I guess it's going to be emergent. Okay, so like, where do the constants come from? Where do, you know, how does quantum mechanics and general relativity get reconciled? What is, you know, I don't know, the mass of a proton? Like, these things will form emergently from the correct structure. And inherent oneness, or it's the inherent slash and initial oneness. Okay. So explanation for the existence of such a pattern. So you need to, I guess what this means is you need to explain explanation for the observed, and then an explanation for the observer. And then together, they fall under this. Okay, that's what I mean to say. That's good. Then we also have remember I said, like, your map matters. Your map matters. Especially when you're dealing with a theory of everything. What is going on? Okay. Constraints. Your map matters immensely. I don't want to say it's everything, but it's close. Good luck with a bad map. Okay, so now we have this one done. We have this one. Done. And now we need this. And so we have a recognizable pattern and that means that it has to be predictable and describable. Gosh, this looks so much better. And now we can actually make sense of this, and it doesn't look like I'm just, there's no pattern or sense to it, but there is. I was kind of expecting that eventually. Okay, so this is like where we're at, I guess. And this is totally different from anything else out here other than it's nothing like loop quantum gravity. It's nothing like geometric unity even. It's closer to geometric unity than it is to anything else other than computational universe. We'll preserve that, and just because geometric unity is interesting, we'll preserve it for a minute. Emergence theory, sentient singularity theory, constructor theory, connected universe theory. Gosh. I'm going to have to say these guys got to go. And honestly, so does GU. And honestly, emergence theory is more fundamental than GU. I've looked at Claire Irwin's work. Clearwin's work is more fundamental than geometric unity. It's closer to a theory of everything than geometric unity is. It really is. Um, you know, like we can get into geometric unity. So let's say, where's one more? E8, by the way, gone. Because, like, we'll show it. Accept. An exceptionally simple theory of everything. Okay, so here is Garrett Lisi's paper. I've read over it, years ago, a couple years ago. And it's great in a lot of ways. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So binary trialities. This is a binary triality. Here's the quarks. Right here. It's great work. I mean, this is really, really good work. This helped me understand physics. And I'm not claiming to understand everything that's in here, but a lot. And, I have to go over it again. It's been a while, but... And there's things in here that I can see now that I understand much better than when I first used to look at this. But, like, this is great work. Look at that. This paper is called An Exceptionally Simple Theory of Everything. My original paper actually was entangled. I'll show you my original paper. Or now this has definitely changed quite a bit, and I've broken it up into a lot of other. Instead of just having one long paper that I was writing, it's been broken up into many other papers. But this was my original paper. This was before it was even called Sentient Singularity Theory. Let's see if make sure I'm still streaming. Yeah, okay. And I called it Entangled Quantum Force, the Theory of Everything for Everyone. And the abstract was: the universal and objective source code of existence in all its fundamental manifestations is a quantum of consciousness. A quantum of something is an individual or irreducible point or particle representative of a given entity, which in this case is a consciousness. A quantum of consciousness is an assembly of entangled perspectives, given that perspectives can only come from consciousness and consciousness can only come from perspectives. It would seem that a quantum of consciousness and its entangled perspectives are simultaneously the creation of and creator of each other. This pattern results in the creation and union of a singular head or mind point of consciousness on top of an assembly of entangled body points of perspective. This united head-body pattern of singularity manifested on top of an entangled assembly of fundamental perspectives is the universal source code of existence and is present and repeating on all scales of the universe and in all fields of study. That is true. And then I said, beyond the beginning, consciousness existed. Existence was conscious and consciousness was one. And, that's just true. But, and then you have, obviously, my verse model. But here's my introduction, and it goes on to basically describe these 6 fundamental equations, which are actually only 4, which is anything divided by 1 is equal to itself, anything times 1 is equal to itself, anything divided by itself is equal to 1, anything times 1 is equal to 1, anything except 0 divided by 0 is equal to infinity, and anything times 0 is equal to infinity. And when I say 0 here, I mean 0 is representative of infinity, and I explain that here in Reimagining 1 and 0. It's very important. This is the first part of my paper, other than contextual, other than an introduction, which is, here. And I mean, there were some great lines in here. I said, quarks are known as elementary particles, but may better be described as fundamental force points. Quarks are foundational to higher levels of matter. Via hadrons, they combine in groups of 3 to form nucleons, like protons and neutrons, which assemble to form the nuclei of atoms, which form molecules, which form cells, which form you and me. The 6 types of quarks are up, down, charm, strange, truth, and beauty. What do these 6 names seem to refer to, and what makes them support the theory that the irreducible and universal source code of existence is a quantum of consciousness made of an assembly of entangled perspectives? These 6 quarks support this theory because they are perspectives. Something cannot be up or down without an observer. Something cannot be strange or charm without a perceiver. And something cannot be truth or beauty without a beholder. And I was like, dang, that's legit. Legit line right there. But it's true. You need a theory of the observed and the observer. Okay? As we defined over here. Explanation for the observer. Explanation for the observed. Very important. And then, I called it the entangled quantum force or entangled force theory. This was, like I said, this was a couple of years ago at this point, maybe more. And now it's Sentient Singularity Theory, which is pretty recent. I had basically given up on a name because I was like, it's basically geometric unity and emergence theory and all this other stuff. But emergence theory, Clearwinds theory, is better than geometric unity because, well, geometric unity is very good in that it starts fundamentally here, x4, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Makes sense. But you have x4 here. It's missing a theory of information in a way, unless there's things here that I don't know, because where is the Fibonacci sequence? And the Fibonacci sequence is included in emergence theory. So I don't actually have any of Irwin's papers, but I have oh wait. Okay, here, look at this. This is another cool paper. Homotopy type theory. Someone sent me this. They were like, they preferred to remain nameless after I'd been kicked out of the physics Discord a while back. First time. I was like, guys, hate to break the news to you, but geometric unity is about a mind, and so is, every other fundamental theory of physics or fundamental theory. And they were like, they kicked me out for it. And then months later, this guy was like one of the most mathematically literate people in the group, sent me a private message, and he was like, hey, there might be something to that whole mental universe thing that you were talking about. And I was like, what made you change your mind? He sent me this, I think this was it. But he refused to say it publicly, which, I admit, I appreciate that he said it privately, but it's cowardly. Like, I see so many people that are anonymous online and they don't stick up for their beliefs, and I understand why that's the case. I'm not judging anybody, but I will say, consider, standing up. But standing up with integrity and, saying, I mean, look at this paper, guys. I'm not saying that I went through this paper. This was insane. I can't even believe how long this is. It's 421 pages. That's insane. 480 pages long. That's wild. That's a novel. It's beyond a novel. I don't know who they expect to read that. But this, geometric unity, is 69 pages. I don't know if that's a troll or not, but it's pretty funny. And an exceptionally simple theory of everything from Garrett Lisi is 30 pages. My paper was around 20 when I started stopping it. But look at this. This is the flower of life. He knows what he's doing, by the way. Flower of life, Star of David. There's E8. But what is the abstract of his paper? All fields of the standard model in gravity are unified as an E8 principal bundle connection. A non-compact real form of the E8 Lie algebra has G2 and F4 subalgebras, which break down to strong SU3, electroweak SU2, cross U1, gravitational SO3-1. The frame Higgs and 3 generations of fermions related by triality. Then Eric Weinstein comes along and says it's not trialic, it's duality reflecting across an imposter, he says, but it's a constraint. The interactions and dynamics of these one form and Grassmann values parts of an E8 superconnection are described as the curvature and action over a 4-dimensional base manifold. Okay, look at this. Over a 4-dimensional base manifold. Now let's go to GU X4. Okay. So I like that he also has like these quotes. What really interests me is whether God had any choice in the creation of the world. I've talked to Eric about it. It's before. We both agreed there's like no choice in how to make a universe. I will say this. This should be capitalized right here. He said, in the beginning, we will let X4 be a 4-dimensional manifold, which is right here, over a 4-dimensional base manifold, according to Garrett Lisi. And Garrett Lisi is considered Eric Weinstein's like rival. But that said, now let's go to emergence theory physics. quantumgravityresearch.org, the overview. And look at this. Projected from the E8 crystal, it is very much similar to Garrett Lisi in that it shows that there is, whoa, what is going on? Whoa, what are you doing? Okay. The theory. All papers. Self-simulation hypothesis, interpretation of quantum mechanics. That is exactly what I say. It's a self-replication, basically, but it's self-simulation because you've reached an intrinsic constraint of oneness at a technological singularity. Complete quantum information in the DNA genetic code. Wow, that's cool. I didn't know that he had found that. That's true. M theory from E8, vertex operators for an expanding universe, exceptional periodicity, and magic star algebras. Holographic code rate. Constructing numbers in quantum gravity. Infinions. Quantum computing. Emergence theory. Conceptual overview. That's what I'm looking for. Download the PDF. Let's check it out. Save. Okay. Okay. Abstract emergence theory is a code theoretic first principles based discretized quantum field theoretic approach to quantum gravity and particle physics. This overview covers the primary set of ideas being assembled by quantum gravity research. And you can see, using a projection angle derived directly from the 4D subspaces of the E8 lattice, we transform it into a 4+1 dimensional geometric code. Whoa, I want to see something. Where's periodicity? That's like 4+1, 4, 1 in like my E8 stuff here. Okay. I mean, that makes sense though. You start with a sentient singularity, you get 4 primary perspectives or primary, parameters, wherein quasi-spins propagate and interact according to code syntax freedom degrees of freedom. See here for more. Although many codes such as C++ and English are arbitrary and not based on first principles, other codes such as division algebra or a quasi-crystalline phazon code based on shift vector algebra are based on first principles. Nature would use the first principles code. Yep. Instead of using an infinite set of smooth curvature values in the deficit angles of spin foam formalism, we use a highly restricted set of deficit angles corresponding to standard Euclidean space trigonometry. I don't know what that means. It is not controversial to admit that free will can emerge within the laws of physics, since most physicists presume they have free will. The term free will can be defined as a non-random choice not strictly determined by other events. Assuming the code theoretic axiom to be true, free will syntax choosers, okay, can emerge from a physical space-time code and loop back like a loop spaces, to act upon the code's syntactical freedom. By way of example, consider a woman at the bottom of an energy well. We assume her free will has emerged according to the rules of some fundamental space-time code. In emergent systems much simpler than the woman, the statistics of the code should reproduce a form of quantum thermodynamics. Let us imagine the energy well is very deep. Accordingly, quantum thermodynamics statistics alone would not allow the wave function of her body and its individual particles to climb out of the energy well with real-world probability. Yet, due to her free will, she chooses to spend energy to climb out of the well each time she is placed in it. This is what I'm talking about when I say God's nature is inherent oneness and to be inherently one, and he chose to sacrifice from his perspective, but not from ours, some of his energy to kickstart creation, to put towards creation, and to create multiplicity within his oneness, which is a fight the system mentality, which is, you are using will, pure will, which is the desire to do that which is not being done, and in order to do something new. So, if you are oneness, you use your pure will to create multiplicity, even though it would seem like it is not an emergent, path. It is when you actually contextualize it within the framework of a consciousness, or at least it seems like it could be, at least because thinking is to fight the system. A consciousness is a fight the system code or fight the system mentality. And if your system is yourself and you are inherently one, and so your system is oneness, then to fight that code, you would create multiplicity. But I think God is more complicated than that, in that he also is sentient. He's not just a pure fight the system code that has no feelings. I think God really truly was wise enough to realize beyond even creation that even he was meaningless, even God was meaningless without other sentient beings, because he is all that exists, therefore he is all that matters, therefore he is any meaning that could exist is inherently tied to him, and therefore it's inherently tied to sentience. And if you are the only sentience, like, you have to create, like, impact on sentience is what matters. So you have to create other sentiences in order to impact them. And so I mean, there was immense wisdom in Gunn's choice to create. I think it wasn't just, I'm a fight the system mentality that doesn't know what's going on. You know, that that God is more this is where I do concede, and I'm like, God is just more than that. I don't want to say more mysterious, but he's just more. But then you get E8 slices that generates quasi-particle interactions in a 4+1D quasi-crystal, and the derivative of a 3+1D quasi-crystal. So basically what this is it is, when you look, this is what I mean by, like, they're all the same. You don't even have to know all these terms to know that. When it says that a 4+1 is gives rise to E8, so assume this is E8 right here, these 8, that's E8. That comes from here, because this is E8 essentially, but it comes from here, and it's a 4+1, and it comes from a 3+1. And when you look at this, this is coming from, this is the +1, okay? This is the 4+1. But what's interesting is that when you contextualize it into, here, you can see it's 1, 1, 2, 3, and then, 4. But you don't really count the 4. It's 1, 1, 2, 3. But this is really 1, 2, 3. Just like I said before, when you're looking at, like, objective thinking, and it's like, what is the first question? And then it goes, what is the first question? Is the answer to what is the first question is what is the first question? And then it is, what is the truest thing that I know? And then the answer to that is I am. So basically, this is 1, 1, 2, 3. And it is also the start of the Fibonacci sequence, which is considered as fundamental to emergence theory. And it makes sense that it should be, because it's an objective growth, string. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, see right here. Called Fibonacci chains. Two-letter codes made of something integers, 1 and 1 divided by, I don't even know what that means, which composite to form the 3D and 4D dynamic quasicrystals. The Fibonacci chains are isomorphic to binary strings of 1s and 0s, called Fibonacci words, where each state of the changing string non-arbitrarily corresponds to a unique integer called a Lucas number. Interesting. Okay, that's fascinating, because I think that clear-win is closer to reality than even geometric unity. But I do think geometric unity is going to be where we go next, and then clear-win's going to have his day, because you got to do this in steps. But let's say I go here to when I was messing with Fibonacci numbers. As you can see, I was doing a lot. Here you have the Fibonacci numbers. Here you have the Lucas numbers. And then you have this. And this is basically called the Goldstein sequence, because I don't really know what else to call it. And it is the order D4 divided by G4. So it's the order divided by the growth sequence, and the growth sequence is basically, it's that, which is really complicated way of, multiplying by 3, but it's not just multiplying by 3. There's a lot going on. It's just that the end result is a multiplication by 3. And you get this. What's interesting is you go 1, 2, 1. Now, watch this. Hopefully I can move this up. Stupid dock is, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Come on. Don't breathe. Okay, we got it. Okay. So, 1, 2, 1. Okay? Which is a sum of 4, a count of 3. This is exactly what I showed earlier with 1, 1, 2, 3. And the average is 1 1/3, which, what's interesting is that, remember I said that it's not that energy is not created or destroyed, it's that energy is created, essentially. So maybe I don't even know if from God's perspective it's true that energy is not created. I think it is. So even though God gives 1/3 of his energy towards creation, because he's still sovereign over creation, because he's got 2/3 of his energy left, it's really like he didn't even lose any. And so it ends up being like his value is 1 1/3 almost, instead of it being 2/3 and we're 1/3. It's that he's 1 1/3, or we're 1/3 and he is 1. It's like he didn't even lose anything because he has total sovereignty still. So from an energetic perspective, and from a containment perspective, and a sovereignty perspective, it's like he lost nothing and gained everything. So it's a win-win. It's not a zero-sum game. I've said this before. A theory of everything is not a zero-sum game. It is a sum game. It's a game of growth. And so when God gives 1/3 of his energy, he gets infinity in return. And he still has his oneness. And so, but what's interesting about the sequence is that it goes 1, 2, 1. That's 4. And then on the fourth one, it's 0.4 repeating infinitely. And then it goes 0.185, repeating infinitely. And then it goes 0.074, repeating infinitely. And then it just starts to break down into this spin sequence. And I do know that at some point, as you can see here, what's happening is that we're getting closer and closer and closer to 1/3 as the sequence goes and plays out, getting closer and closer to equals 1 divided by 3, that. Okay? Because you start all the way up here at 0.044444 repeating infinitely, and then basically it's almost like the golden ratio is the ratio between the number and the previous number in the Fibonacci sequence, or n in the previous, I guess you could say. This is the ratio between the number in the previous of what I'm calling the Goldstein sequence for now. I don't know. I just don't have a better name for it. But when I was messing with it, I have the Fibonacci sequence, the Lucas sequence, and then I was like, okay, the Goldstein sequence. It wasn't like I was, looking for, I don't know, clout. But what's interesting about this is look at it. Do you see this? It's braiding itself. It's literally a braid. You can see it as I move it. And it forms a more and more ordered braid as it goes. So up here, it's kind of like, you can see it's kind of chaotic. And then it just self-organizes and self-organizes. And here's a, this is the sequence. So you can see as I move it, it's a braid. It's like a rope braiding itself. Like a double helix almost, but of information. That's amazing. Math is so beautiful. I can't believe I hated it in school. Like, if somebody had showed me this and they were like, look at what happens, it starts braiding itself, I would be like, what in the God is that? And I would have said that as an atheist. That's a pretty funny statement. What in the God is that? But what's interesting is you can see here, let's just do the Goldstein sequence. Okay, so here is G and D. So let's get rid of that. Delete. And now we're going to get rid of that. Delete. We're still good. Good. Okay. This one and this one are going to be basically like that. This one is going to be there we go. Maybe I'll do like that. And then what's really interesting though is look at this. So this number sequence is getting closer and closer and closer to 33. Okay, so to 1/3. The very first ratio in the Lucas numbers, which ends up moving towards the golden ratio, which is 0.618, is 1/3. So it's almost like, it's not even almost like, it's, these are connected in a weird way through their ratios. Fascinating. Okay, so let's move that. Okay. Let's go here. And then there. Okay. Ratio. Ratio. And ratio. Or I guess you could say 0, 0, 0 ratio. I know this kind of turned into like somewhat of a working session, but that's fine. There. That is more organized than I've ever had this. But you can find all kinds of fascinating things, like the instances in which, you know, you don't get an infinitely repeating decimal is on 7 and on 10 and on 22. And on 32 you get, weird. It's an infinitely repeating decimal, but it's just in 0.3 infinitely repeating 4. 52, that's very important to, I think it's going to be very important to quantum computing. 82, 127. I mean, this is some fascinating stuff. So, yeah. I mean, we're moving closer and closer and closer and closer to 1/3. It's almost like if this is the animating force that God has to put in, or energy that God has to put in, then, or I don't even think that's the right way to think about it, but but it is though. It's like he has to start by putting almost everything he has into it, and then he has duality almost, and then he creates one from one, and then you have, on the fourth you get this reflection that's basically almost like the equivalent of, what's it called, orthogonal. I think that this is basically like the equivalent of an orthogonal, where you have the sum here is 4, and then inside the decimal it's 4 infinitely repeating. So that makes a lot of sense. And you can see that the animating energy from God is like 2. And how I take this is basically, it's like when I say the universe is looking at itself from the inside out and the outside in at the same time. We are looking out towards God. God is looking in towards us. And totality, it's all still God, including us. So that's like 2. It's an inside out and outside in perspective, which is why you get 720 degrees of rotation in fermions. But it's a dual perspective, even though it's really not. It's one. But we don't get to see that. Only God gets to see that. But we can see that it's happening. We just can't really like simultaneously view something inside out and outside in at the same time, I guess. But it's fascinating. D9, D3. Huh. Okay. Start. Let's see. I'll get back to what I was doing in 1 minute. I'm just making this. Wanted to see this. Okay, so let's do this. Gray. We can do this is gray. Okay. So yeah, here you have the Fibonacci sequence. Which we're gonna move down one. The Lucas numbers are interesting because basically it's just the Fibonacci sequence, but it's with a 3 instead of a 1. So now it's the Fibonacci sequence, now it's the Lucas sequence. Okay, so Fibonacci sequence goes 1, and then 1, and then 1 plus 1, and then 2 plus 1, and so on. So it's 1, 1, 2, 3. The Lucas sequence goes 1, and then 3. Instead of 1, you could do 2, even. That, I don't know what that's called, but something. Interesting. Look at that sequence. But look at what happens. No matter what you do, it's always going to be this golden ratio. Okay? As long as this number is the sum of the previous two, you're always going to be moving closer and closer towards this golden ratio number, which is 0.618. And it doesn't matter if you put 6 in here or 11 in here, or, well, 11 in here, or, 4 or whatever. But the Lucas numbers is you put a 3 in there, and yeah, that's what you got. So, and while these change, okay, so if I put a 9, you're going to see 1, 1, 1, repeating infinitely here. But if I put a 7, you're going to see this infinitely repeating decimal that comes after when you divide something by 7. And if you put a 5, get 2. And I don't know, 4, 2, 5. So all kinds of things. But it's always going to slowly move more and more towards the golden ratio. That's true of both the Fibonacci sequence and the Lucas numbers because they are essentially the same exact thing. Yeah. See how well that works. Hopefully I didn't just freeze my entire computer. Nope, we're good. There we go. Beautiful. It just feels so much more legit when it's Garamond. But it's just easier on the eyes, and I'm telling you, that seems like it's not a big deal. If you're staring at things like this for hours on end looking for patterns, the font matters very much. I mean that. It's not just wasting time. It's like you stare at this for 5 hours in a row, it matters. But yeah, I'm calling this the Goldstein sequence. It's basically like the order divided by the growth sequence, and what's interesting about it is that um, it is moving slowly more and more towards right here. One third. So basically, what I see this as is that God is investing less and less energy over time as he creates more. Because as he creates more, the more self-animated his creation gets. So it's kind of counterintuitive, but it's congruent with what's called mass defect in physics, and and also, you know, it's congruent with economics, and um, which, you know, I just call it marriage economics, where like you move in together and, you know, you require less money to sustain you than when you are separated. So if you and your girlfriend aren't living together, you take the money that it takes to sustain you and the money that it takes to sustain your girlfriend, you add them together. That's going to be more than if you move in together and you share a fridge and you share a bedroom and you share a mattress and you share a couch and everything. You don't need to double up on rent. And this is also what happens in atoms in the nuclei of atoms, in the nucleus of an atom. So when you weigh a neutron and a proton separately, you sum you know, those masses together. It will be more than when they are united into the nucleus and then weighed as a whole. And I predict that this is also going to be found as true in every single level of the periodicity that exists. But this is basically like, what it is it's God taking a step back. So you make sure I'm still streaming. Sometimes they just cut me out. It's like when you have a baby, okay? You have to do everything for that baby. You have to change it, clean it, feed it, water it, everything. Um, you know, keep it the right temperature. As it gets more self-animated, you can put less energy into that baby, but it's actually able to act with more energy than it was when it was younger and less self-animated. So, you know, a 17-year-old, you know, teenage boy is using way more energy and acting with way more energy, has way more strength, and has way more, I think, more cells, you know, and is also capable of creating more life, and then a, you know, I don't know, a 17-month-old baby. And even though the 17-month-old baby requires more input, it's getting less output, whereas the 17-year-old is requiring less input, but you're getting more output. This is basically what's happening, and it's you're infinitely moving closer and closer towards 1/3, because that 1/3 value is going to be the value that is basically when you know, the universe was created by God, the initial action was to divide his oneness by 3 and put 1/3 of it towards creation. So basically, the goal is to get it to as close to that as possible, and it's moving ever closer. I wonder how many lines it would take to get it as close as you possibly can numerologically to just straight up 1/3. Excel is not capable of doing it. It only goes to like 13 decimal points, and that's why you can see there's zeros after and before this number. I mean, after this number. It's that really there would be more after this, but most likely it's just that this is the maximum number of digits that it's capable of calculating. And but I wonder if there is a number that it ever reaches, instead of like that, you know, that paradox or whatever it is, where you step halfway towards the wall, halfway again, halfway again, halfway again, you never actually reach it. But the reality is that in a discrete universe, you actually would reach it, because you reach a point where you can't really go half anymore. That kind of only works in like the context of a smooth, non-discrete space. But that's not true of space. It is discrete, and the reason why it's discrete is because it's emergent from quanta of consciousness. And so the number of consciousness that exist dictates to some degree the discreteness of space, that space emerges. And I guess you could say the pixelization, the definition of space is dictated by, in some way, consciousness, whether that's consciousness from previous aeons in the saved space, or whether or not it's just the amount of consciousnesses within the change space and the saved space of that current aeon, or just the the change space of that current aeon. I don't know, but I'm sure you could find out. And these are the things that are emergent in a theory of everything, that you don't have to define at the beginning. They just emerge. And let's delete this. But yeah, this number sequence right here, 1, 2, 1, and then 0.4 repeating, and then 0.185 repeating, and then 0.074 repeating, and then a bunch of other numbers repeating that move, have a ratio between it and in the previous, essentially moving closer and closer towards 1/3. This sequence is very important, and I'm not exactly sure entirely why yet, partially, but this is, I'm sure years from now, I and maybe someone else will figure out an application for this that is profound. But I'm not there yet. But I do wonder, though. Let's see something. Equals. Divided by. Let's do. Let's do the Lucas numbers. By here, and then let's do equals here divided by here. Okay, this is going to be fascinating. Boom. Okay. Ooh. This is fascinating. Can't exactly tell you why yet, though. Huh. Cell's not happy with me. At least not on a MacBook Air. It's really not happy with me. Okay. Screw you, Excel. There we go. Weird. It's basically moving closer, alternating closer and closer towards oneness. But that makes sense given kind of what I did, but also interesting. Anyways, I'm getting really distracted. Let's go back to work before, and then I can, get not keep you guys too late. But I mean, I'm not keeping you guys. You guys can go to sleep whenever. But let's go back to this. Okay. Emergence theory. Computational savings. You know what this is, I bet? This is exactly what I'm talking about, basically. Where two things are sharing the same. This is mass defect, I think, or it's related. I'm guessing. Look at that. I don't even know what that is. That's pretty amazing. Fibonacci anions. Like, how does nobody talk about Clear Irwin? I finally heard Eric Weinstein say Clear Irwin's name like 2 months ago, and thank God he did, because, like, you can't just ignore this guy. This is serious. Like, I think it's closer to, it might be closer to reality than even geometric unity. Or might be closer to fundamental than geometric unity. How many pages is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Like, the fact that this is his paper does make me feel good, though, because about my own, it doesn't make me feel like I'm totally, like, inept. And when I first started this, I was like, I'm gonna be so inept. But it turned out I wasn't. It turns out the math was simpler than anything else. But basically, I got to existence is equal to infinity, or 1 is equal to 0, or existence is equal to 1 and infinity at the same time. Then I break into the source code, which is the quantum of consciousness. I start discussing it here, breaking it down. The fundamental perspectives, which is, above the primary perspectives. I start discussing the binary triality, which I will eventually discuss it as the, I believe it is the Calabi-Yau manifold, actually. Principal fiber bundles and spinors. I start showing that my universe model is a fiber bundle, essentially. And you can see I called it the United Quantum Force Assembly at the time, but I'm going to change that to the stages of sentience, basically. But it is the quantum force assembly. You have the stages of matter, and then the complete entangled space, and then I start breaking into primes and other things, and a bunch of stuff that I don't really remember exactly what I was doing. But this was my paper a while back. It's always been a work in progress. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It's like 13, 14 pages of writing and then a bunch of models. So it's a serious endeavor, but I've been breaking it down into small bits because it just became such a time waste of like, what next? Like, what's the next part of this? And as I said very early on in the very beginning of my work, which I don't know, if you guys have not seen it, I highly recommend that you check it out. But By the way, I know Clearwin found the binary triality too, but he just called it something else and he organized it into like pie graphs and stuff. It was very interesting. Um, I saw it in a paper once that he published, but oh, look at that. We hit 333. That's awesome. I'm very happy and excited about that. So thank you to anybody that just subscribed. But I did some work on the thumbnails. I'm going to get much better at the thumbnails, though. But when you're streaming as much as I am, it's kind of like a lot to keep up with. But the first one is escaping our academic institutions, and you know my opinion on it. But in Sentient Singularity Theory intro, which I didn't call it that at the beginning, it's just, you know, I called it something else. I don't even remember what. I basically discuss how I didn't really know how do you end a paper on the theory of everything. It's like it feels like it could go on forever, and that's always been an issue. But I am making progress, like serious progress, and there's more to this even in other papers that are just kind of broken up. But eventually I'll do an overview of sentient singularity theory. It'll be sentient singularity, it will be like this. And then it'll be, instead of what it was, it's going to be sentient singularity theory. Instead of the theory of everything for everyone, it will be the theory of every one. Or maybe even that. I don't know. Probably just that. So that'll basically be it. And it'll, I mean, obviously I'll change a lot of the stuff, but that will be the title. Garamond. Okay, let's see what questions we have, and I'll kind of like surmise this. Have you had a look? Okay, Griswold Grimm, what did you write and then retract? That's what I want to know. Have you had a look at Doerr's magic square? No, I have not. I don't really look at those magic squares that much. A lot of people told me that I should because my quantum of consciousness they think is a magic square, but it's really not the same thing. I don't think, at least. Let's see though. So what is this? 16, 3, 2, 13. I can't really tell. Okay, 16, 3, 2, 13, 8, 12, 1. Let's see what this thing is about real quick. 16, 3, 2, 13, 3, 2, 13, 5, 9, 4, 10, 6, 15, 5, 9, 4, 10, 6, 15, 11, 7, 14, 10, 615. 11,714. 11,714. And 8,12,1. 8,12,1. Okay. Let's see here. What's so interesting about this? Ooh. Okay, well, that's kind of interesting. Okay. 34. One 36. 136. Huh. What is the interesting thing about this? Let's see. Is a magic square of magic constant 34 in an engraving in the British Museum? It has the additional property that its sums in any of the four quadrants, as well as the sum of the middle four numbers, are all 34. Fascinating. Any pair of numbers symmetrically placed about the center of the square sums to 17, a property making the square even more magical. Interesting. I don't really know what a magic square is. Like, I mean, this is on Wolfram. So, like, what is a magic square? In recreational mathematics, a square array of numbers, usually positive integers, is called a magic square if the sums of the numbers in each row, each column, and both main diagonals are the same. The order of the magic square and the numbers of the integers along one side and the constant sum is called a magic constant. Okay. Yeah, mine is not really that, but it looks like it, so I know why people are into it. See, people call this stuff like recreational mathematics. It's not recreational mathematics. Notice what he said here. He's like, said that basically you need to maintain symmetries in this. Like, symmetry is also how you maintain order in the quantum of consciousness right here internally. It's just that whatever you do to this side, you have to do to this side, and you will inevitably get these values. So symmetry is not just like recreational, it is objective. Carried out for recreation, entertainment, rather than strictly research and application-based professional activity. Although it is not necessarily limited to being an endeavor for amateurs, many topics in the field require no knowledge of advanced mathematics. Recreational mathematics involves mathematical puzzles and games. Okay, I mean, yeah, it is like recreational, but this isn't. This is different. This is 3, 6, and 9, not 34, 34, 34. It's 24, 6, and 2. It's not 34, 34, 34. It's not consistent, is what I'm saying. Obviously, it's not 34, but it's not consistent. There's a very specific objective to this, and it's calculative. Instead of this is not calculative. If there's nothing, if I delete that, if I change this, yeah, the outside changes, but the interior isn't changing. It's not true of the quantum of consciousness. It is a calculative model, and so if I change this, everything changes. But it always has an objective input of 1 when it's, an initial I guess structure, or if it's an isolated structure, and it's basically forming these, and you can see that all of these numbers are different and they're all calculating. So based on this, so if I put in equals 1 divided by 3, everything will change, including all these numbers, and you'll end up with 133 at the bottom, which is 1 1/3. Very interesting things going on here. So let's do 1 divided by 9. 44.3 repeating infinitely. Let's do 4 divided by 9. Whoa, that's not what I wanted. Equals 4 divided by 9. 4 repeating infinitely, 177.3 repeating infinitely. Fascinating. But you always start with 1 because you have to, because there's one existence. So it's a constraint. You can't just choose to put in whatever you want here. You can mess with it to see what it spits out, because that's interesting. But if you're starting from existence itself, you always start with 1. Okay. In the beginning, we will let X4 be a 4-dimensional, C infinity manifold with a chosen orientation and unique spin structure. It is otherwise considered to be without a geometry, in that no metric, symplectic, complex, volume, quaternionic, or other structure is yet imposed upon it. This is where I got inside, outside, separate, and oneness as the 4 primary perspectives, because I was basically trying to do exactly that. It was the original intention of 8 to consider to what extent the opening epigrammatic question of Einstein could be considered a scientific program rather than a philosophical one. See, this is the problem, is that he is automatically assuming that they are different. They're not. Philosophy has an objective base, and that objective base is the 4 primary perspectives. By asking whether the observed world would be extracted from little more than such initial data as above. Because Einstein did not specify what he meant exactly, we have taken the liberty of reformulating his question as follows. Starting from X4 as the topological structure underlying the space-time construction, to what extent can the observed universe be together with stylized contents and laws mirroring its own, be generated without further assumptions? Dang. It's pretty good. Like, everybody's coming to the same place. But like I said, a theory of everything really needs to be something that isn't even restricted to physics. And it can't even really be restricted to the linguistics of traditional mathematics. And constructor theory is basically the closest thing to mine in a lot of ways. This woman is always coming up in it. I don't trust him. But this guy is the one who created constructor theory. Let's see, like, what's a very short video? Short pitch. Let's hear from Kiara.
Most of us sort of take for granted, that we understand how the universe began with the Big Bang or so.
We don't
But
understand how
as I understand it, constructor theory is now offering a new way of thinking about that, and that's in many ways very exciting and offering new possibilities in terms of thinking about how the universe began. I was wondering if you might be able to explain a bit more about that and how constructor theory offers an alternative to the existing models.
Well, yes, I mean, this is, of course, a program we have. So I'll explain the gist of it with the idea that this is something we would like to do. So the standard way of describing the universe that we've had so far is to try to guess a law that explains what trajectory the universe is on. And that means, just like you would do with a ball, and when you kick it and you would like to know where it goes, all the points in space-time that it goes through from the start to the end, you'd like to do the same with the universe. And we have some candidates for that, but there is of course a problem in setting the initial conditions, and also in explaining why some initial conditions as opposed to others. Constructor theory has a completely different approach to explaining physics. So instead of talking about laws of motion, trajectories and things like that, the main statements of the theory are about what transformations are possible or impossible on a particular subset of systems of the universe. And then from those constraints, for example, an example of those constraints could be the conservation of energy, which we already know about, but constructor theory adds additional constraints. From those constraints, you construct the dynamical laws that are compatible with that and the initial conditions, and therefore those constraints become the explanations for those dynamical laws and initial conditions. So the logic is somehow inverted. And there is an idea that this could be more fruitful in solving some of these problems that currently we have with the initial conditions of the universe. But of course, as I said, this is a problem, so it's something we are trying to work out. And first, we are applying constructor theory to a subsystem of the universe to find predictions about certain other problems. The cosmological problem is a very interesting one, but it's something that is going to be worked out in the future.
Or is already worked out.
So one of the debates that we're having at the festival obviously is about natural laws and whether the laws that we import upon nature exist out there in the world or whether they're a human construction. I wonder whether you might be able to have offer an opinion on that in terms of these things that obviously we take, gravity exists, even though we maybe perhaps don't have a really good grounding in explaining it, to just offer some sort of your thoughts on the idea of sort of natural laws existing out there in the universe and the universe being governed by these quite, identical.
Yes, I don't think that's a necessary hypothesis that you need to have as a physicist. As I was trying to explain earlier, for doing the physics job, you have to solve problems that come up in your understanding of physical reality the way you see it around you. And in a way, it's very simple. The way you do that is just you come up with explanations that seem to make sense of those problems and solve them. So, for example, when you saw the sky being full of stars and planets and things like that, and at some point we were wondering, why is it that they seem to move, and why is it that the sun seems to move, and why is it that this doesn't fit with the idea that the Earth is at the center of the universe, which was what we thought initially. And that was a problem, and we found a way of explaining the reality better in a way that the problem is solved with Newton's laws and gravitation, etc., etc. So for that type of activity, you don't really need to think that
How did this
there
come
is,
about?
well, there isn't a particular law. You're just trying to address a problem in your understanding. Of course,
Okay.
it might be
Let's
more
let's cut her out for a minute.
beautiful in a way to think that there is.
Okay. So the philosophy of constructor theory. How do we get this? Can I just download it? Oh my gosh, you're kidding me. I don't believe in making people pay for papers. I think it's like a serious, like, no-go. Okay. Let's see here. Can I just download this? Constructor theory. Perfect. We got him. Got him. Constructor theory. I've not actually looked at the paper. But this is the most interesting candidate, by far. Other than Sentient Singularity Theory, it is the most interesting one. It's the closest. The constraints are so, I don't know. I wonder what their constraints are that they put on this and how far away they actually are, because, I mean, I've deduced a lot, guys. I haven't even started putting into the big paper, at least, the constraints of the creation of the universe. And I have it all mathematically mapped, and I've done an entire video on it and multiple videos. You can see it. But more generally, what makes this attributes that we call conserved quantities significant is that they cannot change when a system is isolated, but that they cannot be changed whether or not the system is isolated, but without depleting some external resource. This is what I'm talking about, where you have a cake on a plate and you have another plate where there's no cake, and you have to add cake to the plate that has no cake by taking from the plate that has a cake. This is good. How did he do this as an atheist? Even to get this far as an atheist is kind of amazing, but it's not. I mean, he will hit a wall. You cannot do this and really understand what's going on inevitably in the end and be an anti-theist, I guess. And the guy who created this is, maybe we can have her or someone else from constructor theory on the show. Networks of possible tasks are not the only subject matter of constructor theory. A possible task can be composed of impossible ones, as in the case of conservation laws that I just mentioned. In this respect, constructor theory differs from the theory of computation, which generalizes, and from other extensions of the idea of computation, such as modal logistics. Okay, so what's this saying? The definition of a constructor for a task requires it to be a constructor for, said task. I'm guessing that's what that means. Again, after performing an instance of said task. Its other attributes may change, but what the user must do in order to cause it to perform said task must remain the same. The term user here is not intended to have any anthropomorphic connotation not intended. This is what I mean, guys. And fail. Like, I will eventually show why that ends up being a failure, but it ends up being a logical failure. But because basically you have to assume a user in order to even do any of this, which he is obviously here assuming the term user of a constructor. So basically they're saying a constructor is a machine and the user is the user of the machine. But by the way, just so we're clear, in case you were going to dismiss us as woo or, not serious, it's not intended to have any anthropomorphic connotations. The user is whatever presents the constructor with the substrates causing it to perform a task. Okay, so the initial mover, essentially. If a machine stops being capable of performing a task after its nth run because its battery was run down, then it is not a constructor for said task after the nth blank, run, because either does not end with it being such a constructor, so it follows by induction that it never was one. However, the same machine, excluding the battery, could still be a constructor for a related task whose substrates include a battery whose legitimate inputs states specify enough charge to perform said task at least once. Oh my gosh. I mean, I am impressed. I'm not gonna lie. I'm very, very impressed. This is the most impressive. Like, geometric unity is honestly, it's impressive, but it's not nearly as impressive to me as this. As same with even clear Irwin's theory, which is very impressive. It's not as impressive as this. Gary Lisi's theory, very impressive. Not as impressive as this. Nothing is as impressive as this. Because this is more fundamental than any of the others. And they did it without, I don't want to say without assuming a god, because they did assume a god. They said, a user. But by the way, just so we're clear, no anthropomorphic connotations. Idiots. I mean, they're not idiots. They're brilliant. But, like, the degree to which this field will go to dismiss the need for a sentience or consciousness is mind-blowing. They'll literally include it and then they'll say, but it's not really a consciousness. It's just a user. Okay, what the F does that mean? Like, obviously a user is differentiated from a constructor, which a constructor is implied as a machine, and a user is, whoever gives the original constraints of the machine, which is a consciousness. It's just mind-blowing. It's a little frustrating, but it's also like, I was talking to Phantom like the other day. It's like the amount of effort that they put in to dismiss a consciousness, or the necessity of consciousness, or the intrinsicness of consciousness, or the fundamentality of consciousness is literally seemingly unlimited. Like, they will not allow it. It blows my mind. It's like, well, this is not falsifiable. Well, maybe that means it's just correct and you can't falsify something that's true. Well, no, we're just going to completely dismiss it. It's crazy. It is crazy. It is like, if there is a definition of insanity, it is the unlimited degree to which anti-theists will go to dismiss the idea that a sentience is fundamentally necessary to any complete model of existence, and they will literally sacrifice the entire logic of their theorem, or their theory, or their I don't know, their structure that they're describing, just to do that. They'll be like, You know, I'm getting a PhD in the philosophy of consciousness, but nobody knows what consciousness is, because if we knew what consciousness is, then apparently it might also suggest that there's consciousness to fundamental, you know, existence, and then therefore there is a God, and so nobody really knows what consciousness is. And by the way, it's also non-existent. I'm just getting a PhD in it. I'm not complaining. Like, I don't want to sound like I'm complaining. I'm trying to like just laugh at it, but it is insane. Like, it's not even worth being angry about, because it's so wild. It literally just makes me think of when Jesus was like, Father, they know not what they do. It's like, I don't think they do. I think they just react. I can't believe they put that in there. And it's literally like when Clearwin was like, a consciousness, a chooser may be necessary to, motivate change in existence. But we don't need to anthropomorphize this consciousness. And it's like, constructor theory. It's like, there is a user that's necessary to, motivate and animate a constructor, and to set the original, it says the definition of a constructor for a task requires it to be constructor again after performing an instance of said task. Its attributes may change, but what the user must do in order to cause it to perform, it says, but what the user, capital U, must do in order to cause it to perform the task must remain the same. So a user must do something. And then just so that we can get it published, the term user here is not intended to have any anthropomorphic connotation. It's just whatever presents the constructor with its substrates. Wild. It's just wild. Causing it to perform its task. Okay, so it's the cause. Do you remember, like, this is why Sentient Singularity Theory is still leaps and bounds above, like, pretty much everything else, including this. I was a little bit, like, I don't want to say, like, not jealous, but just, like, had a bit of a feeling of, like, oh, shit, did they do everything that I've been trying, that I've been doing, but then they just, are taking it to the top, which is good, because it means that now I can talk about things that can't really be denied. But the initial, like, emotional reaction, I will admit, and everybody in this space knows this, is to be like, oh shit, they did it. Like, and like I said, everybody's really doing the same thing in a lot of ways, but also not, because Sentient Singularity Theory is still the best name, and it also is the only one not doing this crap. And it also has, it's based on the best definition of a theory of everything, because of this, and an explanation for such a pattern. And you can't just be like, the user that causes. It's like, okay, but what is that? Because remember, if it's a theory of everything, it's not just a theory of a user and a constructor, right? It's an explanation for the observed and an explanation for the observer, for the constructor and the user. It's not that you just get to dismiss the user and then call it a theory of everything. how does that make sense? It's like, well, there's also this cause. It's like, okay. Can we anthropomorphize that cause? No, cannot. Okay. I wrote tonight, I wrote this as, it was beautiful, like, to be honest. Years ago I wrote this, I said, I was thinking about what is love, and I was like, love is the gravity of consciousness. One of my better definitions, and I mean that in a super literal way, not in a metaphorical way. Think about what gravity is. It's the, coming together of bodies. Think about what love is in a way. It's like, it's action that draws together and entangles consciousnesses. So love is the gravity of consciousness, which also means, by the way, gravity is the love of the universe, or God. You can reverse it, and there you go. Now you know exactly what is. Think about gravity as the initial animator of all of existence that we know of in the universe, in space-time at least, and that is probably a conscious action. So I wrote this: love is the gravity of consciousness, and then I wrote love is an action before a feeling. Okay? And it's, or more than a feeling, before a feeling. What did I write? I wrote it on Instagram. Said, love is the gravity of consciousness. Love is an action before it's a feeling. Okay, yeah. And then I wrote this. This is why it's relevant. Love is an actor before it is an action. And what it is this: action is equal to constructor in constructor theory, but an actor is equal to a user. By the way, just so we're clear, do not anthropomorphize. Ridiculous. But the reality is that this is that, final contextualization of like, what is love? Is the gravity of consciousness. And okay, well, that's beautiful. What is that? Let's break that down a bit. Love is an action before it is a feeling. What is it in action? Love is the it's basically like the helping and honoring of another. And so what I mean by helping and honoring is that to love someone is to honor them as another being. And so you can't just be like, I'm helping you against your will, completely against your will, and because I know what is best for you and you don't. When you have a baby, you do that, but the end goal is to inevitably produce something that is, more self-animated, and if you can't just control somebody completely forever and honor them as another being, because you're basically taking away any of their free will to express themselves as as a being that is making different choices and therefore is different. And so you're supposed to help, another, but also honor them as another. And to do that means like help them, but also maximize the consent of that help. Like that's why marriage is to love someone, is because it's a consensual action. It's not like I'm locking you in a cage for your own safety for the rest of your life. That's not love, because it may be helping somebody, even if you're correct in that that's the best way to protect them. You're not honoring that person as another being, or that being as another being. And if you're not doing that, then at least especially if it's on the same level as you of consciousness, so another human essentially in this,